Hey, this is Ross Baden with Roleplaying Public Radio. This is RPPR episode 139. Woo. Chains of Command.
139.
139.
Gate 9.
139 hype. This episode is going to be about organizations in role-playing games, i.e. players running them. Because Tom wanted to talk about it, and it sounded like a good idea, so we're talking about it.
Just so you know, I still have the pox.
Yeah, and with me, not as always, but a lot, is Tom and Dan.
Hi.
Hello, Dan.
Yeah. He's been playing a lot more recently, thanks to Gate 9.
Gate 9.
Anyways, yes, Tom is a little sick, so please excuse his coughing. I'm having a bit of a coughing, too. Hopefully I can keep that.
Not as awesome as I am, though.
No, you win the coughing contest.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm a champion.
And I had a rough day at the dentist yesterday, so I'm on painkillers. So that's fun.
Yep. All right. So let's see here. We have a bit of news, though. Our Base Raiders campaign, Gate 9, has started.
Gate 9!
And to celebrate it, I'm having a sale of Base Raiders in print and PDF on my Gumroad store. Gumroad is an actual e-seller. So I'll have 30% off the main book if you buy it as a print plus PDF combo with free shipping in the U.S. So if you haven't got Base Raiders now, you can get the print book and PDF book. And if you want me to autograph it, just send me a little note when you write it, when you buy it, and what you want me to autograph it how, or I'll make up an aspect or something for you.
So you're saying buy your book.
Buy my book. Buy my book.
Buy his book.
Buy his book.
Yes.
So we've tagged that aspect today.
We have. Well, that was more of a compel on my. I have to do it to get a fate point. So let's talk about organizations and games. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about what you were thinking when you...
Well, it's something I really, really enjoy doing in games that, well, mostly that I run because I'm trying to say this without sounding arrogant, but I'm like the only person I know that's done a game like that.
Okay.
I've run a couple of them. One was in Cyberpunk, but it was just for Aaron and David. Mm-hmm. And there was another time, it was a Mutants and Masterminds thing, but it's where the players build an organization by themselves from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoy, I found I really enjoyed that aspect. I almost enjoyed that more than some of the stories I was doing in those games. Mm-hmm. Where it's, the players have choices, all right? Well, in most of the cases, it was a villainous type of organization. So it's, okay, well, you have to acquiring money. How do you invest it in your organization? Do you invest in new members training, intelligence?
Right.
And the players really seem to enjoy doing that. And I thought about doing it when I realized I'd like to be in a game that does that where I'm playing.
Right.
Because I've never done that before.
Right. Now, Dan and I both run games like that, but you were not in those games.
I was sadly not in them.
We have, of course, I ran the Fortunes of War campaign, which mixed Iron Heroes with Rain, and Dan, you mixed Pathfinder with Rain, I think.
No, Fifth Ed with Rain.
Fifth Ed with Rain, I'm sorry. I mixed them up so much. Hey-o. So, Dan, tell about your experiences doing the same kind of thing.
The experience I had was I tacked on the organizational system as kind of a way to deal with...
Rain.
For Rain, as a way to deal with the fact that the cast that I had for that group was really big, and I had a maximum table size, but a lot more people interested in playing, so people were rotating in and out. Those of you from the Patreon will remember, that's that campaign.
Yeah. It was the Tolus one.
Yeah.
Which is all the episodes, of course, are on the RPPR YouTube channel, if you want to look that up. So, yeah.
And I was kind of setting that up as a thing to run behind the scenes between sessions so that people who couldn't sit in on every session would still be able to participate on some level by shaping how the plot was going to move forward through organizations. Beyond the fact that life got really busy and I had to not run the campaign anymore in order to take care of real life stuff, or at least put it on indefinite hiatus.
The slayer of many a campaign. You're far from alone in that.
Right?
Yeah.
It claims many.
Yeah.
It also kind of turned into a thing that I think myself and the players realized that it was going to take a lot more investment than probably people were willing to do for a once a week, maybe sometimes I get to play in campaign.
Yeah.
And so on that front, it didn't take off, but I do like the core tenets of it in that it would still work And the fact that Reign, the organizational rules work on a month-long scale. So, you could probably run a campaign in Reign with tacking on, if you don't like doing one roll for a fantasy, you could reskin the system for it to work in pretty much any other system if your players just realize that there is going to be this one roll component to your whatever D20, Fate, etc. game. And I actually did something similar to that when trying to get when my off-microphone 4th Ed campaign, we tacked on Reign at the Epic tier to help the players conceptualize the fact that there really wasn't a leadership feat in 4th Ed. And they were doing what they could to, be epic-level heroes that were inspiring armies, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that worked out pretty well. But some of the feedback I got from one of the players was, I really don't want to play Reign. I want to play D&D.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of issues when doing organizational games, and in my experiences of the Fortunes of War, which you can all hear on RPPR Actual Play, tacking on Iron Heroes, D20 and One Roll Engine did not blend well.
No,
and part of it was the fact that I didn't really put as much work as I should have into figuring out a way to integrate the two systems, and part of it is just D20 is. Yeah, it's just inherent to Iron Heroes. Iron Heroes itself is sort of I like what they're trying to go for, but it's a flawed end result. Yeah. I
mean, of the different D20 gluts, I do like Iron Heroes for what it is, but as far as creating a balancing aspect, you'd be better off with going with one of the high magic variants like Arcana Evolved. So... I mean, that might have worked out better, but then you were attacking in magic on your...
Yeah, well, I wasn't. Well, actually, I mean, Iron Heroes was specifically non-magical.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, the problem is there are a lot. So, building an organization can help, obviously, integrate players and make them... It kind of solves the murder hobo problem in that the players become connected to the setting and they have a stake in it and they feel connected to it. But there are several structural problems or difficulties you have to overcome. And if you create a system from the ground up that does that well, like Reign does, then you can have awesome results. But if you're using a system that doesn't purpose, and there are very few systems do. There are other RPGs that do this. Conspiracy X does it, which is uses the same system as I think is All Flesh Must Be Eaten. And
usually, the crunchier the system, the harder it is to do it.
No, it actually doesn't. I mean, there rules.
Found.
Well, GURPS does it actually well.
Yeah, GURPS does.
Yeah, so like for example, I did try to run a Fallout campaign that would use organizational rules.
I am so pissed that didn't succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. So the problem with the GURPS game was also real life. People we started it during the winter holidays and nobody was able to meet after that.
Wait, was that the one where I played the immortal senator from Arizona or some such?
No, it was set in Missouri.
Okay.
It was in GURPS and it had mass combat rules as well.
I was the head of the ghoul colony of Rala.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it never got off the ground because nobody wanted to meet after that first session for it, or not enough.
Beartown was a good idea.
Yeah.
Also, the bane of a many campaign.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you're doing an organizational thing, you kind of have to structure your entire campaign around it. Well, I mean, you don't have to. Actually, it could just be kind of an aside thing. It depends on first you have to address whether you want the campaign to be centered around the organization or if it's just you have an organization.
Yeah, you really need to ask yourself, what does my campaign get out of having an organization have any level of involvement?
Yeah. So I think... some of the biggest thing is, what is your campaign going? I mean, this is sort of a fundamental question. Any campaign is, what do you want your campaign to be about?
Mm-hmm. I kind of like the times I ran it. I made it like the organization was like an integral part of.
It's the heart of the campaign.
Yeah,
yeah,
and I worked out a system for it too.
Yeah, but the other thing is also you don't necessarily need like special rules for it. You could just take a standard kind of RPG campaign structure and then. Instead of you're trying to save the kingdom, you're trying to build your organization,
right.
And then just struck every session. Let's see here. There is a mission that you have. Like the standard RPG thing is your dudes, your group of player characters. You're you're all bound together for reasons, and you have to complete some overall goal. Save the world, stop the bad guy, or whatever. So you can swap out, for obvious reasons. So you could one do like swap out save the world with build your organization, or two be build your organization in order to save the world.
Right.
Or take it over.
Well, that's it. Yeah, or take over an existing organization,
or take over the world.
Or to take over the world. Yeah. So
Hail Ouroboros.
Hail Ouroboros.
And in that case, you could basically, by doing window dress, instead of like go to the dungeon to get the MacGuffin that you need to kill to get the key to open up the dungeon to the next part of the quest, you could have go to the dungeon to get a item that a wealthy person wants in order to get their backing for your organization.
Right.
And that person will then give you access to something else, which will then also help your organization. So that's kind of a superficial thing, but you don't need any new game mechanics for it. If it's entirely story based, if it's always like, if you hit these milestones, your organization will be like this and it'll do this. The other approach is, so that's the super minimalist approach. Sure. I think the other thing is to go all the way in, which is the one roll engine, the Rain approach, where your organization has a lot of game mechanics and you have all kinds of cool stuff you can do with it, and then it's totally integrated in the game. But there is a middle approach, I think.
And actually, I just had a random thought sitting here and listening to your talk, and I'm sorry I didn't bring this up before, but build your organization using Fate accelerated rules. Just switch out the keywords for organizational style keywords. Yeah. Similar to how Rain does it, and you just run it as a Fate.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for, is the middle approach, which is take your retheme mechanics and change them to suit your organization. For example, in Fate, it's very easy to have minion-based powers. In Base Raiders, there's explicitly a minion trapping for superpowers. So you could say, like, oh, you're trying to improve your minions, your organization and their influence. So that's another. So that's kind of in like a D20 system. You could have. There's already in Third Ed and Pathfinder. There's a leadership feat, and I'm sure there's Pathfinder supplements that have more feats and prestige classes that would give you better benefits to an organization.
I mean, there's probably like 6 or 7 of them, honestly.
Well, yeah. So that's kind of the middle approach. Just make a couple of new game mechanics. So you can go minimalist, no new mechanics, sort of medium, some new mechanics, or overhaul, which is like entire system from the ground up. And so that's the first thing you kind of have to realize is how much work do you want to have this organization be game mechanics wise. And the one thing I would recommend is not to just try and hack on a different system onto your existing system. As both of our experience of using Rain in other RPGs didn't work out so well.
And I think a lot of that also had more to do with the fact that Rain does not play well when you try to tack it on to not one roll engine style games. Yeah. Which is why I was saying, it's like, Fate Accelerated is simple, straightforward, easy enough that if you need organization v organization combat, you setting up a character but just renaming the stats to organizational style stats would suit you better than trying to build a Rain organization and figuring out and teaching everyone how one roll works.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, a middle ground approach would also be actually using the Rain mechanics, but in another one-roll engine system. Right. So, for example, if you were doing monsters and other childish things, you could have every clique in your high school or junior high or whatever. So, be represented by a different company or organization. Right. So, so those are kind of the game mechanic issue. But aside from assuming you figured out what you want to do game mechanics wise, the other thing is how is this going to change the game theme and like what kind of story you're telling? Because telling a story about an organization is different than telling a story about a single hero or a small band of heroes.
No, it's actually when I ran them, that's what I discovered. This was David and Aaron like back in like 2007. They were way more just I just want to do my own thing. Yeah. But when I ran that game with them, where they were the two members trying to build an organization to oppose another much more powerful organization, they really worked together way more in that game. When they felt like they were kind of sharing, ownership of something, which is why I think it really works so well and why I'd like to explore it. It's that the whole point of the game is to build an organization from the ground up. It's the players or I feel like they're investing in the same thing with all the other players. And not just a cool game, which should be kind of like everyone's goal in an RPG.
Yeah.
But this is but it's something beyond that. Like, we actually own something in this game.
Yeah. That's a good point. And certainly having a situation where you can order a lot of NPCs around to do what you want, that just like, hey, that's a good Skinner box mechanic. Like, hey, the positive reinforcement. I get to order people around, they'll do whatever I want.
I would love to do another campaign like that.
Yeah.
And where you guys, like, the players handle the really important stuff or the missions that are way too important to entrust to minions. But at the same time, you can also, like, okay, well, we're doing this, let's go have our minions take care of some business.
Right. Yeah, and that can be good. Dan, like, what led you to sort of add in the organization stuff? Was it just because of the sheer number of players you realized you had to have like an organization?
Well, that's where I started approaching it and where I added to it. And then again, once we started getting into it and playing the games, there was a lot less interest in it, and there was a lot less. The people who were interested in maintaining it were people who were showing up every week, which is not why I tacked it on, So it kind of led me to shift more, and it really kind of shifted how I was approaching running Dresden, especially in Season 2, whereas the organization was more of the framing device rather than what the players were building towards. Like, you guys were still involved, engaged, and felt like you were a part of the organization, but it's not, and you could still make directions, but it wasn't such a central focus that you were.
Yeah, we weren't really decision makers.
Right. I think there are two separate things here. Being in an organization is different than leading the organization. Right. Because being in an organization, there are many games that support that, like, for example, Delta Green. But often that's a framing device to answer the question, why are all these weird people hanging out together and doing this and trying to solve the same problem? Mm-hmm. So that's a different one. That's a different kind of thing. So, I mean, if you think of TV shows, like, most TV shows are about individual people and their problems, and sometimes these can be procedural, like, True Detective or any sort of cop show, or sitcoms where there's just people having difficulties in love and life and everything. But organizational shows have different themes. I think, for example, like The West Wing, that's very much about an organization and the kind of difficulties. So I feel like if you're making it about leading an organization, you should address different issues than what you're doing. It shouldn't always. Obviously, you have to focus on the organization itself, not the PCs leading it. Mm-hmm. And there are ways to do that. So I think, for example, you have to talk about like how the organization handles problems internally. Right.
Is it a swift execution? Do you have that power the power to do that?
Right. Well, one thing is about an organization is they're not, human organizations. Maybe if you have an alien hive mind thing, then you have an organization that all acts as one. But in human organizations, people have different minds and different thoughts and different priorities, and so you lead to internal strife because they don't all march in unison, Right. So how do you handle that? Like, Tom, did you have internal conflicts in your organization?
Oh, sure. It was mainly, the players were the command, the overall leaders of the organization. But, right. Yeah, they quickly found out that you have to have lieutenants to handle some of the more mundane stuff. And it was really kind of fun. Like, they didn't trust any of their lieutenants ever.
Okay.
I mean, they were like in a villainous organization, to be sure.
Right.
But, I could tell it was kind of fun. Like, they were really reluctant to entrust important things to them. Even though when I was telling them, like, okay, well, if this thing goes unresolved, then you're dealing with the thing you have to do yourself is going to have some difficulties. It's going to have some problems. So, like, okay, so who do we entrust it to? Like, I don't like that guy. No, what about him? Well, he might screw us. He's almost too smart for his own good. They would spend up to 15 minutes just like, okay, well, probably like an actual head of an organization would do.
No.
Like, okay, it's like, all right, fine, then we're agreed it's going to be this guy because we just don't trust anyone else.
What? Aaron and David being the only players deliberating at length about who's going to screw them over the most.
I know, right?
So yeah, there's that is definitely an aspect of delegation. Yeah,
but yeah, they had a lot of fun just coming up with the internal workings of everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were really, I think David in particular is really into, okay, let's have code words and what the titles for different things.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on your players, they might fixate on something, but once again, if the whole point is, if you want to spend 10 minutes in game talking about what titles you call each other, and everyone's cool with that, then knock yourself out.
Yeah, that's definitely a leisurely kind of sort of if everyone's having fun, what's the problem? So kind of school of philosophy. So
I'm actually working on an independent game itself that is all about your minor supervillains trying to build up your power in a city.
Yeah.
So it might be base raiders just on a street level.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So you can do a lot of interesting things with that. Dan, did you ever address those kind of issues? Or how would you address those?
Well, I never got any of those organizational games to a point where that was a conversation that took place. But again, the games that I have played in or ran where the organization functions as a window dressing, like Obelisk was a pretty big organization. There were other organizations that you guys interfaced with, and you were able to manage and delegate just by role-playing and skill checks already inherent in the game, to where I never felt like I needed to stat out the organization, that it was easy to keep abstract.
Right.
And honestly, some of the problems that I've had since then are people, as the game progresses in power tier and people shaping and taking their own objectives, that they're wanting to, behind the scenes, change the organization in a way that other players don't get input on.
Yeah.
And that's going to be one of the big hurdles I have to address for when Season 3, when it ever starts.
Yeah.
Yes, picking up multi-season campaigns. That's always fun, especially after long breaks. I think you can kind of talk about this as sort of like the burden of leadership. I think that if you're going to have an organization game, you have to talk about the responsibility of
the
being
tough
a leader.
Decisions.
Because like most organizations, the people aren't. One, if you want them to be fanatically zealous, loyal to you, you have to earn that. You have to get them to do that. Like, people don't automatically become, zealous, worshiping fanatics of one leader or another. That leader has to do something to earn that loyalty.
Unless your name is Bartleby.
Well, he had to do something to do that.
He had to seal their minds.
He had to edit their brains, that's something. Brainwashing is a thing, especially in a lot of, mind controls things. So they have to do something in order to earn that loyalty.
Actually, I was thinking that was the reputation became important.
Okay.
Where, yes, if you got a reputation for being ruthless and, dealing with, disloyalty swiftly.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but if you become, if you flay someone alive because they've disobeyed your orders, how many people are going to want to work for you?
Right. Obviously that depends on the degree of, disobedience.
But yeah, the player's actions in-game, I always, greatly would reflect on the organization.
Right.
So yeah, if you do the typical D&D murder hobo thing, who would really want to work with them?
Right.
Honestly.
Right. And that's kind of the challenge is, reflecting the culture of your organization through leadership, they react, the followers, the subordinates will react to how you lead them. And so if you act as like a very, stereotypical supervillain and kill people for minor, they'll stab you. Your subordinates will then betray you when they can. They'll steal supplies. They sell you out to rivals.
They won't dare defy you openly. But the moment some other crime bosses come, or whoever comes by, is would you be willing to betray your boss? Wait, you mean the person that could snap at any moment and just kill me on a whim?
Yeah,
let's do this.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the very least, they're going to be stealing boxes of Post-it notes and taking them home.
Yeah, exactly. It might be minor stuff, but then that can come up. I could see a interesting adventure coming from the idea is like, okay, we're our budget. We don't have enough money to do Project X. Like, what do you mean? I brought all this in. We robbed a bank or we killed a dragon and stole its gold. Like, yeah, but we have shortfalls here, and it's like, and so then they can become like the PCs have to examine their own organization, and then they find out they've been bad leaders because they haven't been, they've been just ignoring minor
They
details.
didn't spring for dental.
Yeah, or maybe one of the lieutenants is actually like seemed to be very helpful and capable, but was just a con artist who was lying to
and siphoning money off them.
yeah, and siphoning money off, embezzling. Yeah, what?
Bigly.
Bigly. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, Dan. That's we're just talking about role playing games here.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we're not topical at all. So the idea is to reflect this in the game, and so every game should. The organization should react to the nature of the PC. So if the PCs are heroic and self-sacrificing and act as paragons of leadership, the organization be like, "Oh my God, look how badass and great we're led by Captain America. I have to live up to his ideal," And then you get SHIELD.
Or you could also have it's like, yeah, they're great. It's like, but man, they're really trusting.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Like if you. Depends on how that's another challenge of leadership is figuring out who to recruit. Are you going to recruit the kind of people who would be inspired by it, or look at those suckers, I can exploit them. The question is, how do you want to reflect that, and how much of the game should be about internals? It also kind of depends on is this the organization versus the world? Is it versus another organization, or is it the organization versus itself? What kind of adventures do you want, conflicts you want to have in the game? And
I think an organization versus itself style game story campaign probably would lean more towards the no extra mechanics to light middle ground, because again, then you're more of the framing device a la Delta Green.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think actually the organization, the best example I think is actually the Laundry, because it has rules for bureaucratic infighting. So but again, and even if the PCs are leaders, and they have to deal with committees and other bureaucratics, supervisors, and rules and regulations, and a bunch of other factors. And also you can have a variety of things. So you could be like organization versus external world versus, as the first two adventures, then organization versus another organization is the third adventure, and then organization internal conflict is like, to represent all the problems that have sprung up because of all these things. Oh, we fought these bad guys. We saved all these people from this calamity. And then we dealt with a giant monster. And so everyone's just beaten up. We don't have any money left. Everyone's morale is low.
Or the PCs made a morally questionable decision that challenges what the people they've recruited thought the organization was doing.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to be resurrecting people to torture them for secrets,
right.
And then killing them again.
I didn't know we edited people's brains.
Yeah, exactly. So
did you guys edit my brain?
Exactly.
Already?
Yeah. Actually, a great internal conflict would actually be like a mole hunt. Is there's a spy in your organization? Like, what links do you go to find the spy? How many people are you willing to spy on of your own?
How much of your own resources do you want to spend?
Yeah, exactly. So,
because I think to me, running that resource management needs to be part of it, at least a little.
Oh yeah. And these can be sort of story things, like make it a series of choices to players. Do you support this program, or you want to spend the resources to improve your own organization in some way?
Me personally, I like to have stats for the organization.
Okay.
Like when I run it, it doesn't have to have a lot of impact on the gameplay. Mm-hmm. But I think they're I like to have different statistics for the organization and ratings for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just so they can give you some idea. Make it simple, do the old World of Darkness 1 to 5 dots or whatever.
Right. Again, going for the middle ground, not a complete overhaul. Again, I would, unless you're really a super mechanics guy, I would recommend looking for a published system, or again, if you're using Pathfinder, there's tons of stuff. But
or again, I would just say if you want resource management to be part of your organization, again, reskin Fate Accelerated, guys.
Yeah,
it's really
easy. Fate can do a lot of stuff. Or GURPS. GURPS has explicit rules for organizations.
I mean, if it hasn't already been done, or someone doesn't beat me to it, that might be my next writing project.
Yeah.
Well, it also depends on what kind of setting you want to do it in. Like, another point is also like the genre matters too, because like a fantasy organization is different than a modern organization than a sci-fi organization.
How so?
Well, like Middle Ages, I would say in ancient games and fantasy games, organizations were much more like they were the law. Like if you are an adventurers guild, you had life or death over, especially like in the monster infested wildernesses you would be working in. Whereas modern organizations have to deal with larger nation states and the entire world. Like if you're the Wizards Guild, you had the Wizards Guild law, and it's a very common trope in fantasy setting to say wizards deal with wizard criminals, and wizard problems, and the clerics they are judged and policed by their own and that kind of thing. So I mean, obviously it varies setting from setting, but it's different than like if you're if you're like a government, super criminal fighting agency, you have to deal with other government agencies. You have to deal with other international agencies like Interpol and whatever. Or if you're a villains guild, you have to deal with other criminal cartels. But a fantasy one, I think they're not as connected to the entire world. Like often they only deal with the ones immediately neighboring them.
Right.
So like you don't have to deal with Interpol in a fantasy world because there is no Interpol. I mean, there are exceptions.
Well, but I'm sitting there thinking it's like, if you're wanting to look at maybe doing a universal organizational system that could go multi-genre, then instead of, just have stats that abstract to different things based on what genre you're in.
Yeah.
Like a diplomacy stat in a fantasy game is more about how do your agents respect boundaries, customs, and traditions of their neighbors, whereas diplomacy in a more modern style game starts looking more like bureaucracy.
That's true. And well, that's the other thing. It's like a difference between fantasy and modern eras would be like the rule of man versus the rule of law. Mm-hmm. Like whoever controls the Wizard Guild sets the rules. I mean, there might be, aside from tradition and precedence, everything. We've never done this. We've never summoned the Minotaur on an eclipse. That's just not done.
Mm-hmm. And in a fantasy setting, it's much more easy to monopolize a certain resource.
Yeah.
Like in this case, like magic. Like usually, the Mages Guild of the city is in charge of all magic in this area.
Right. Yeah, they police their own, they control their own. But in a modern setting, you have bureaucracy. Like the ancient kingdoms, for the most part, they only had a very rudimentary bureaucracy, and the king could just ignore them, Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't give a shit about the written law, Magna Carta, what the fuck's that,
Or in fantasy, there's a king.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you can have dictators and author, and those kind of governments in the modern era, but they still have bureaucracies. They're corrupt bureaucracies, but they're still there. So I think that would be a difference. And then sci-fi organizations, the sky's the limit. In Eclipse Phase, for example, there are, autonomous, anarchist communes where the private ownership of property is illegal. It's just whoever needs the thing the most gets it for that, as long as they need it the most. So, like, people could vote you out of your body. Like, oh, yeah, you're this new person needs it, so we're kicking you out of it. So that's very different, for example. So that creates a different kind of setting. So I think genre matters a lot. It also means, like, if you're doing a horror organization, like, say, The Laundry, then you have to worry more about the organization controlling and manipulating and spying on you. If it's a heroic thing like S.H.I.E.L.D., they're like, yeah, fuck yeah, we're going to kick Hydra's ass, I mean,
America.
Yeah, America. Unless it's like, unless you're doing something like Winter Soldier, which is like, can we really trust S.H.I.E.L.D.? Oh my God, they have sleeper cells. In which case, you're doing Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but with superheroes. Mm-hmm. So I think genre matters.
Genre matters in how the organization plays. Again, I'm just thinking mechanically. How do you what's similar?
Well, I mean, it depends on what kind of approach. If you're going minimalist, it's just fiat. If you're going middle ground, obviously you wouldn't use Pathfinder for a modern game.
Right.
I know Pathfinder has support for some modern stuff, but
what?
Well, they have for like guns and stuff like that.
I know.
Yeah. But I would not use that for a modern era.
I wouldn't use Pathfinder to try to run Delta Green by any means.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Delta Green, but Delta Green, that would be different rules if you're trying to run it as trying to run an organizational game as Delta Green, like trying to be one of the leaders of Delta Green. That would be a very interesting challenge. Like, I kind of want to, yeah.
How do you do that without going insane first?
Well, that's it. Yeah, that would be one of the challenges. Well, part of it is like the leaders probably never have firsthand contact with the stuff. They just read reports.
Right.
And so they kind of sanitize it, so that their sanity.
Because your two routes on that is that either A, you're an agent who realizes that these guys that are running it behind the scenes don't know this shit. And so you got to show them how it's actually done.
Yeah.
Or you're someone from outside the organization saying, well, this is horribly mismanaged. I should be put in charge of it. So how do you build enough?
Well, I think that's actually going to be offered explained in the next Delta Green book, which is coming out this year.
Woo! Buy the book.
But that's an interesting question. You could do a campaign on any just make your assumptions and kind of go with it. And then do you want to make it to where like it's a war kind of setting and you're just like the general or the Delta Green director throwing men to their agents into their doom, into the meat grinder, and just trying to hold off the inevitable as long as possible? Or is it more of a we can kick their asses, more optimistic, quote unquote? So yeah, you have a lot of different options. It's kind of just what you want to accomplish. Is just keep in mind like what kind of teams you want to have. Like what is your? I think part of it is also what you think a leader should be. Like what is the ideal leader? Who is the best kind of leader for an organization? And like whether the PCs can match your expectations of a leader. Like should they be heroic? Should they be Machiavellian? So Tom, like what was your campaign theme? What was your sort of hypothesis?
It was cyberpunk.
Yeah,
but it was underworld.
Okay,
so it was a criminal organization.
Okay,
starting out as just a couple of guys.
Yeah,
ending with they were pretty much controlling a huge percentage of all the crime in a city.
Well, what was your thesis? Like, how did you determine whether they succeeded or not? Like, was it like, for example, if you were using, for example, if Scarface the movie is your game, if you're trying to do Scarface the movie, it's about Tony Montana rise to power and control of a drug cartel, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason he succeeds so well is because of his ruthlessness, his paranoia, and his willingness to do what his competitors aren't willing to do. And so if I was doing a Scarface game, I would be like, are you willing to kill these guys? Yeah, okay. Are you willing to kill all of these people? Are you willing to kill innocent people? Are you willing to be more ruthless and more dangerous than your competitors?
How many puppies are you willing to kill?
Yeah, and so it's a moral thing. Like how?
Well, here's how I handled it.
Yeah,
I presented them with obviously the problems for each step of the way, and I asked them, "Do you want to solve this quietly, or do you want to do it in a way that could attract heat?"
Right.
Obviously, dealing with it quietly would be discrediting, discrediting a rival or convincing a supplier through diplomacy or a distributor that, hey, our product is better.
Yeah.
Which would require them to it would require skill rolls, like using the same skills that are in the system.
Sure.
Either themselves or hiring people with the skills to do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you were going to do it, loud, I would say, okay, so you want to just kill this guy? Are you looking to just assassinate him, or are you looking to wipe him out and his organization? And then I worked out a heat system where, okay, you can do that. That'll wipe out your rival, but now all the cops are like, holy shit, there was a massacre at this guy's estate.
All right. So you had the heat system, and so you say Aaron and David did very well at the end of the campaign.
They did.
They basically won. So how did they win? What choices did they make to succeed, to get that?
They chose the overall goal was to take out either the leader of like a.
Well, how did they do it?
They did it through having enough resources to take them on directly. They decided to now we're gonna.
Okay.
So we're gonna actually we're gonna physically attack them.
Okay, so they succeeded because they. So your challenge was your thesis was that leaders are willing to defy their greater system, that they're willing to buck the trend, and so that's why they won. Is because they were like, we're not just going to be here meek and be a small part of the system. We're going to go against the current. We're going to go upstream and we're going to fight and we're going to win.
Yeah.
All right. So Dan. Did you have any kind of thesis, sort of theories for what a good leader should be in a game? Did you ever get that far?
We never got that far, and The thought that I had when dealing with Obelisk and having Mira is that if you guys ever decided you wanted to wrest control over Obelisk from her, like her main drive publicly is that, you know, the area needs protecting. It's been neglected for too long. So you would have to show that you would be better at it. There are some other things if you delve more into what her other motivations were, you could probably start to dismantle her or discredit her personally. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't change the fact that publicly you have to convince everyone else in the organization that she's doing it wrong.
Okay.
And that was the thing. It's like,
well, it seemed like she was a good leader and like she was doing the job.
Yeah.
So why was she a good leader? Like, what was her qualities that enabled her to be a good leader?
Because, as you know, she was willing to make sacrifices of herself when the situation called for it. She compartmentalized efficiently and effectively, and she also delegated to people that she could trust to the level that she could trust them.
Okay.
And also just she knew she had contacts and she wasn't afraid to call them in.
Okay. So, all right, she was pragmatic, but she could make the right calls without going too hard in one way or the other, right?
Well, you guys never failed in such a way that made it seem like it was a bad call.
Right. So if you were doing a game where players were the leaders of an organization, like how would you test their worthiness to be leaders, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
I mean, what is the mission statement?
Yeah, okay, there you go.
What is the mission statement of the organization?
Okay.
Are they doing what they say they are on the tin?
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of a genre thing too. Like if you're doing a superhero game, it's probably what it says on the tin because you know it's 4 colors: good guys versus bad guys. Let's wrestle with superpowers. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing horror, then it's obviously not what it says on the tin, and you know it's a darker secrets and lies. You know,
publicly what their mission statement is, but you know what is their mission statement in regards to horror?
Yeah,
like Delta Green with the Special Access Program. I mean, I don't know what their official mission statement is. It's probably 7 pages long and is full of words that are multisyllabic and incomprehensible.
Yeah,
but their actual mission statement is the contain all vectors, preserve humanity.
Yeah, it is, and that's and Delta Green. So yeah, a Delta
at all costs.
If you're doing a Delta Green leadership thing, it would be about making those hard choices. So yeah, it would be tests like if you're the leader of Delta Green, one, who do you recruit for it? Do you get the best and the brightest? Do you get the darkest and most ruthless agents? Do you get a mixture? Do you mix them together? Or do you have like team good guy and team puppy killer, puppy kicker? And you send them on different, do you send team good guy out to investigate, crop circles and team puppy kicker to go burn down a cultist house? Or do you mix them up so they, because if another thing about, leadership is also not only managing resources, for example, managing agents, your subordinates. So if I was running Delta Green leadership, it would be about the people,
mm-hmm.
that are basically going to die because of what you tell them to do.
And how does the organization respond to incidents like Shinchenko?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, how do you manage an agent who obviously needs to be retired in a more aggressive sense?
Or do you just throw them? Do you just and do you shoot them? Do you put them in a mental asylum? Because everything has a cost. If you just shoot them in the head, other agents are going to realize that's going to happen to them, so they better hide any sort of weakness on their part. If you put them in a mental asylum, then the agents
and worse, but then the agents could work against you and try to bust them out.
Well, yeah, exactly. Or a cultist does, or a monster breaks them out, or possesses them, or the cult or the crazy agent, summons something in the insane asylum with their own blood or something like that, and that's a new mission. So yeah, that would be the other thing is experience. Like Delta Green missions are often very hard, so like you basically have to manage your guys to level them up so that they can become good enough investigators to go, stop, Ithaca from turning Canada into ice, or something like that.
So essentially what you're saying is that a Delta Green leadership game just turns into Darkest Dungeon set in modern times.
Yeah, to a degree. That would be my first approach. And that's not necessarily my only approach, but that would be one of my first inclinations, because you could do different Delta Green games. Another one could be purely political thing, like dealing with other government bureaucracies and like stealing resources, from other.
What's the British Delta Green called again?
Pisces.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like trying to negotiate with Pisces, who actually has jurisdiction over this vector event.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of things to deal with, and that kind of brings up another thing: dealing with subordinates. Because you already talked about having lieutenants, assigning jobs to lieutenants. But the whole point of an organization is you don't have to be there to solve everything. So at some point, your lieutenant, is going to have to deal with a conflict on their own. So how do you adjudicate NPC versus NPC conflicts that happen off screen? So
what instructions do you give them? Do you trust? How much do you trust them?
Well, it's not even that. It's not trust is one issue, but like. For example, you tell your lieutenant, all right, go take the guys out and go rob this bank. And the question is, the players are off assassinating someone else on the other side of town, so they can't help at all. So, Tom, how would you adjudicate the NPC robbing a bank that's guarded by NPCs?
The way I did it,
assuming
the way I would do it,
all right,
is I would have like a difficulty system. Like, okay, like I would have complications that if you like. That's why resources come in. Like, if you spent the resources to investigate like this particular job or mission, like the bank robbery, then you could find out some things that you could know ahead of time. If you don't, and you just send your lieutenant to go in blind, he's not going to know that they've recently.
So the lieutenant, you wouldn't have the lieutenant make any of these calls himself.
Would depend actually, but I would also have some stats for the lieutenant.
Okay,
minor, like very basic to know, like okay. How competent is he? Does he think ahead? Is he impulsive? Mm-hmm. So depending what it is, like maybe if the lieutenant can't figure out that they've now like contracted with GenSec and now there's professional guys guarding this bank now.
Yeah.
Then he's going to go in and they're going to come back like, yeah, the entire team you sent to the bank was taken out or arrested
by a skulldozer.
So the mechanics wise. You would just think about it and just make the assessment.
Yeah, like I would actually come up with a list. Like if you're doing like jobs, then like I would actually have like a list of jobs, and they would choose what to do. I would already have down exactly how difficult this is really going to be, and whether or not I would make planning a part of it is. So if you have the lieutenant was good at planning, I would say okay, well he'll go ahead and he might research this. And then I'd also there's planning, and then how good is he carrying out a plan?
Okay.
And then depending on how good he was, like you may want to have two lieutenants. One guy who's super good at thinking ahead and planning, and another guy who's just the guy that I'm going to kick in the door and do the job.
Okay.
So there's always it's always what they know and what they can do.
Okay. So, but in terms of game mechanics, like how much would you like? Let's say they tell go rob this bank. It looks easy. Go do it. And they're doing their own thing. At what point during the game session do you adjudicate that?
Well, in the case once again doing that job, you'd also have to give them some resources to go do the job.
Okay.
I say if you give if you want to carry out a successful job like that, carried entirely by a lieutenant, it's what they know, what they can do, and what you give them to do the job.
Okay.
And if enough is sufficient, I would actually have a role that all three of those things would plan together.
Yeah.
Add to the lieutenant's role to carry up the job, and then you would come back and find out how they did. Because I would actually do all those roles myself.
So you'd be doing a series of roles.
A series of roles.
Okay.
And then you come back from the job, and you're either going to have your lieutenant it's a piece of cake, did the job, or we're dead.
Okay.
And also, my loyalty wasn't that good, so I'm totally going to make a deal with the DA.
Okay. So they do the thing, and if it's a significant thing, you just make the rolls, sort of abbreviate version of what the PCs do. All right.
I like to keep it consistent. Like it should be similar to what the rules for the PCs are.
Okay, so consistent. All right, that's good. Dan, what's your approach to handling NPC versus NPC conflict that happens off screen?
What are the PCs willing to risk?
So again, like Tom, you would ask the PCs what resources you're assigning to the NPC.
Well,
and also one of the things to find out would be the potential heat for this job.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on the system and job. Yeah.
Well, no, it's what risks are the PCs willing to take on themselves in order to make sure this gets done. So if you're telling, oh, go do a thing because we have more important stuff to do,
Right.
and you're not going to do anything to make sure that job goes as smoothly as possible before you go out and have your own adventure, then it'll happen how I want it to happen.
Yeah.
At that point, if you are willing to, like, okay, well, we need to, for example, we need to false flag an adversary out of hiding, and we need another organization to help us do that. And they go, okay, well, are you willing to come and spend a few weeks out in our turf to help us out later?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I'm just talking about in general. Like, the whole point of an organization is that the NPCs are doing stuff off screen. And at many points, especially if it's a PC-led organization, they will come into conflict with other NPCs. And it's not necessarily something proactive like robbing a bank. It's like, it's very common to ask your NPCs to guard your base or your headquarters or whatever.
Right.
And so when when your followers come into conflict with other NPCs, how do you resolve off-screen conflicts?
Probably, again, with what did the PCs invest to make sure it went smoothly, and how does that make sense to how you need to fiat it? Because if you're not...
So you're more like kind of do it case by case.
Yeah, do it a case by case, and if you have a mechanical system for organizations, you run it as the rules say. If you are not running it and the organization is more of a window dressing and it's going against the NPCs, if the PCs didn't put any skin in the game, then it happens however you need it to as the GM.
Okay. All right.
It's like if the PCs put anything of their own resources at risk, they need to have some agency and some factors, and they need to be able to influence the ultimate outcome of the event.
Yeah.
If they didn't put any skin in that particular game and they just said, oh, well, we put Rollins in charge of it, okay, then, well, this is what Rollins did. Do you want him to be in charge of things in the future?
Okay. So yeah, that's kind of like for me, the balance is, I would also make sure my first thing would make sure the players know how I would be adjudicating this before the campaign begins. So they have this idea, because the idea obviously is you're like, oh, your PC is some ninjas are trying to sneak into your base, Oh, well, we should go back to base to resupply, just coincidentally. You don't want that kind of metagaming or excuse to metagaming. So at the beginning, it's like, here's how I'm going to handle this stuff. So I will be either making a lot of rolls behind the screen at certain times, or I'm just going to be adjudicating by fiat, or here's how I'm going to do it. You guys keep that all in mind, because when an NPC versus NPC conflict comes up, you only know about it when your NPCs tell you it happens. Maybe the ninja infiltrates your base and the PCs find out later, and they're like, well, let's not tell the boss, and that kind of thing. So depending on how it happens. So, but that's something you have to think about as a GM. This kind of thing will happen a lot, and you definitely don't want to do. I think the only one mistake is to fully adjudicate it as though it was a full PC adventure. Like, okay, well, I have these 5, followers, and they have these stats. This ninja has this stat,
and I roll this fistful of dice for these NPCs, and this fistful.
All right, I'm
going to
run 10 rounds of combat behind the screen, and you guys don't get to know what happens. So just give me 30 minutes. You don't want to do that. I mean, I guess you could do that if it's in between sessions, and you're like, let's find out what would happen if you like those kind of things. But otherwise, maybe not. So. Yeah. Any final thoughts on organizations? I feel like we've covered a lot in this.
I think we have.
Yeah.
And I have a new writing project.
Heyo. Fate organization stuff. Fate is definitely a great way to handle it with aspects and fate points, and stunts.
Resources are just your fate points. Ta-da!
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to do a super villain organization game.
Sure.
Like a campaign built around it.
Yeah.
Which is going to be my next project.
All right. Something to look forward to in RPPR. So next up we have shout-outs and anecdotes.
Skate 9.
Skate 9.
All right, we're back with whatever synthwave or vaporwave I put in there. I don't choose until after the show's recorded. So, anyways, shout outs. First off, I would like to mention a book I got a review copy of recently. Zombies, Run. Zombies Run. Zombies Run, I guess, is the way to really say it. It's Zombies, Run.
At least it's not Zombies Run.
Yeah, that'd be good. The subtitle is Keeping Fit and Living Well in the Current Zombie Emergency. Now, this is from the people who do the Zombies Run app, which is a GPS tracking app that you can use while you're running to try and help you get into shape. So basically, the app is like, oh, you're our new runner for our post-apocalyptic enclave. We need you to go out and get supplies. Okay, first off, start walking. Now run. Now walk. Oh, there's zombies. You better run really fast. And they mix it in with music. So I've used it before. It's a really cool app. And the book itself is a very beautiful hardcover.
With shadows.
Yeah, with well, those are the zombies. And the
yes,
first.
I have.
And it has a lot of running fitness advice, also zombie post-apocalyptic, survival advice, how to make weapons, also fiction about the town that they're in. This is actually based in the UK, so they have the ministry, not anything like that, but how to do a running plan, little maps of how to build a community and stuff like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really cool. It's it's like half practical fitness advice, half zombie apocalypse survival stuff, which you never know when that'll be handy. So yeah, if you like fitness. The other thing, yeah, it's a hardcover with a little dust jacket, so kind of an odd choice for a fitness book, I thought, because you might be taking this out on the field or something like that. But yeah, I don't know.
Or you can always get more money out of a hardcover edition.
Yeah, I guess you can. Yeah. It looks good. It's a nice looking book. So kudos to that.
It's pretty.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, Dan, you had a shout out.
I had a couple.
Yeah. We'll do one. What's your first one?
First one, in keeping with the theme of organizations.
Ooh, yeah.
And how Tom and I kind of started the organizational talk a few weeks ago, is that Michelle and I have been building our board game collection, and we acquired Lords of Waterdeep. And if you want to play organizations in a fantasy setting, I mean, you could play a campaign over months and months and months, or you can play Lords of Waterdeep over the course of an hour or so.
Yeah,
and Betrayal.
It's a worker placement game. I played it as well.
Yeah.
Where you're a Lord of Waterdeep, and you're trying to get enough points to become the real Lord of Waterdeep.
Truth.
And you get those points by assembling adventuring parties and sending them out on quests.
Yes. And you send your agents out to recruit them, while at the same time trying to keep your identity totally secret from the other players. Or you can just be really obvious about what objectives you're trying to complete, and people that are good at metagaming can go, you're the Piety Arcane Lord of Waterdeep. I should probably start keeping you out of those quests.
Right.
Because I's a dick.
Yep. Well, because I want to win, weirdly enough. So, yeah, it's a fun board game. I really like it as well. It was probably the first real worker placement game I played that I can think of. So
it's one of the few worker placement games that I actively enjoyed.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fantasy game I like to play.
Yeah, I like it even when I don't win. So that's how much I like it.
Yeah, a lot of those. That's the sign of a good board game. Is did you have fun after not winning?
Yeah. Next up, I'd like to mention another book, this 37th Parallel. This is a book about a UFOologist who has spent his life, studying UFOs and cattle mutilations, and the author just kind of follows him around for a year and sort of sees what his life is like. He's Chuck is a microchip designer by day, UFOologist by night, and it's kind of interesting because it's sort of an overview of the whole UFO. What UFOologists believe and what kind of phenomenon happens around the country, not just sightings, but also cattle mutilations and weird stuff like the Taos hum. There's this town in New Mexico with a weird humming sound that some people can hear and others can't, and no one knows what causes it.
Tinnitus.
Tinnitus, yeah.
Mop.
So it's for me, it could be good inspiration for unknown armies if you want to play someone who's sort of obsessed and kind of unhinged and making faulty pattern recognition. Oh well, this thing and this absence of evidence must mean evidence of absence. This clearly proves that government conspiracies are blah 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 blah. Or if in Delta Green, you could use this as, someone who is probably going to interfere with the Delta Green operation at some point or another. I saw strange lights over here. Why are all these men with guns here? And, oh, God,
Where did this dinosaur come from?
Yeah, exactly. Spoilers. So
there wasn't a lake here.
Yeah. So yeah, I like that. It's a good little read. Dennis Detwiller's read it as well. So for his Delta Green research. So yeah. Anyways, Tom.
Yep, mine is a game on Steam, and a text game of all things. I've kind of forgotten how much I used to like those.
Oh, muds.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's called Congress Wolf.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a text-based game where you play the campaign manager of either the Republican, the Democrat, or the independent candidate for Congress. And there's also werewolves, and the big case going around Congress is a werewolf, a lycanthrope civil rights bill.
Mm.
That it's a whole lot of, first your boss is killed, the person that you were supposed to be working for dies, is mutilated the first day, so you have to take over the job.
Yeah.
And so it's finding out who killed your boss, and also greasing the palms and getting your candidate elected, and you decide what to do with the bill. And also, the guy may be
not
stalking
the congressman.
Yeah, and also someone might be stalking you.
Oh,
that's not eerily topical at all.
Yeah. So all right. Very interesting. Have you already beaten it, Tom?
I've gotten one ending. Yeah, there's like 12 different types of different endings you can do.
Okay. Let's see here. Next up, I would like to also mention a game on Steam, Nefarious. This is a platformer game. I got a review copy of it before PAX South, and it's a platformer where you play a villain who kidnaps princesses and a prince in one case, and you have to fight heroes, and so it's like
backwards Castlevania.
No, it's more like Mega Man or something like that. Okay. Where it's a standard platformer, you can choose what order you do the stages in to a certain degree. But you get to choose. One thing, every boss battle is reversed. Like you play, they're kind of rip off iconic boss battles, and then you play the boss character. Like do you remember the Sonic battle where like Dr. Robotnik had a wrecking ball attached to his little pod, and he swung it around at Sonic? You basically play Dr. Robotnik in one of those.
Okay.
So like you're swinging around at one of the heroes and you try and beat him with a wrecking ball. Another one, you're basically a Final Fantasy boss and you have to do a turn-based strategy against a band of heroes and take them all out. And you get the idea. So, but it's mostly standard kind of platforming with the gimmicky the boss fights. But what's interesting is once you pick up each of the princesses, you get a new ability that's unique for that level. So, like in some levels, in the fire level, the fire prince. When you jump up, will create this lava rock trail following the arc of your jump. That's like a temporary platform you can jump up on. So you can jump. Oh, there's a platform, so you can jump back on it and then jump onto the next one, and then use that to raise up. So clever choice. I haven't beaten it yet, but it's been a fun game. So yeah, Dan, you got another one?
Fun games are fun.
Yes.
Just not related to RPGs at all, but something that I stumbled across and found interesting and want to share. Those of you that have listened to the podcast have known that a number of us have worked at a facility or a type of facility and have all worked at the same place at different points in time. And if you ever kind of got curious as to what was that work like, since we can't talk about it a whole lot due to HIPAA stuff, just pick up on the miniseries on Netflix, Don't Call Me Crazy. That kind of gives you an idea of what we dealt with on a daily basis. And it's also kind of if you ever sat down and wondered like why mental health for teens is important, that will give you some insight on that too.
Oh yeah.
So cool. No, it sounds like a really good series. I'll have to put it on my queue. I'm currently watching Young Justice right now because Caleb and Spencer recommended it on the Mix 6. So
yeah, that's a good show.
I'm just behind on my Netflix, Dan. I'm sorry.
God, Ross, watch more cartoons.
I know, right? Speaking of funny shows, though, I would like to mention Letterkenny.
Oh my God, yes.
Which is kind of like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Only everyone is it takes place in a very small rural town in Canada, and everyone there is like as verbose as a Shakespearean actor. So it's
you're saying that with your sarcastic smile?
No,
I'm not. We're not. I love this show.
Yeah, I was not hallucinating. There are other witnesses.
Each show just starts with them waxing poetic about something.
Yeah,
sitting at their fruit stand.
So yeah, there's tweakers, hockey players,
hockey bros.
Yeah, hockey bros. Just small town Canada with unusually verbose personages in there. So
I mean, everybody is just is like a Shakespearean actor.
Yeah, in terms of the fluidness of their speech. It's very funny too. You would like it too. So I don't know how you can watch it. I acquired it. It's fine.
You acquired it.
I acquired it. So yeah, it's in Canada.
You don't need to know how.
Everything in Canada is free anyway. At least that's what I've been told.
Freaking socialists.
Yeah, exactly. So I got two more after this. Let's see here. 2 more games. Joking Hazard from Cyanide and Happiness.
Nice.
It's a party card game, kind of like not Lords of War. It's kind of like what is that super popular one?
Cards Against Humanity.
Yeah, Cards Against Humanity, only it's funnier because it's just like make a 3-panel comic. And you know Cyanide and Happiness, the little stick figure kind of guy. Well, not quite stick figure, but very basic. And so there's hundreds of cards, each with two characters from that. Blue shirt guy and green shirt guy. And they're either talking to each other or one saying something to the other. They're doing something wacky. And then you each have to figure out punchlines, a third panel for the comic. And then the judge judges that one, and then you move on. And so it gets very funny because you can get some very absurd results with it. So it's a fun little party game. So yeah. And then finally another board game, Pandemic.
Oh, the Cthulhu one?
Another organization.
Yeah, speaking of sickness. Pandemic: Reign of Cthulhu, which I got for Christmas, and is a very fun board game about trying to save the world from Cthulhu. So instead of viruses, you're trying to block the spread of cultists and shoggoths. And there's some variations in the rules about like the more cultists open up, the more great old ones awaken, making it harder and harder to win. And yeah, it
is really hard to win.
We've only won 1 out of 5 games so far. So yeah, it's fun. But it's very challenging, so I liked it a lot. So anyways, that's it for shout-outs. Yay. Shout out! So finally, we should talk about anecdote from our Base Raiders campaign, because Base Raiders Gate 9!
Gate 9!
Gate 9. So in the second tier of the campaign, in the first tier of the campaign, I introduced later on Bio Buddies, which are totally not Pokemon knockoffs at all.
Totally not Pokemon at all.
Not.
And I'm saying that as I'm playing Pokemon right now.
So in the second tier of the campaign, Bio Buddies go wild, and people start using them.
Not to be confused with Girls Gone Wild, please God, no.
You guys talk about it. You're like, what your encounters with the Bio Buddies in the second tier?
I'm into the game more recently, so I wasn't down on the ground.
Yeah, Tom was added to the campaign in the second season because Faust moved away. So
no. Hi, Faust.
Hi, Faust. Yeah, my biggest experience was I kind of had to pretend I was one.
Yeah, that's true. Your character basically looks like a Battletoad. So if you're spray painted silver, I think I said you could be a shiny Bio Buddy, which is very rare, so people wouldn't be familiar with you.
It was a shiny Battletoad.
Yeah, you're a shiny Battletoad. So
they kind of had to coach me.
Yeah. And you can only say Battletoad while you're in disguise, incognito, and so you had to fight in an illegal fighting underground Bio Buddy fighting ring. Which you had to visit as well. Another one to you. What was your circumstance of? Yeah, that was more of a set piece.
Yeah, it was a set piece because I needed to get a hold of someone who was gambling, who's gambling on the Bio Buddy fights. But I needed to also blackmail them. Like, I know you've been gambling, and your bosses won't like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, that was more of a set dressing thing. So.
But in getting there and doing the setup, the fact that it's been tied in really close to Sean's organizational powers as a supervillain.
Yeah.
Well, is he a supervillain?
Yeah. Morally ambiguous super person.
Okay.
So
Rational self-interest super individual.
he actually uses those kind of minions as cannon fodder. So he's trying to do right, kind of. So.
Who is John Ouroboros?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of fun with the Bio Buddies. They'll be showing up more. Like the players are trying to price fix the Bio Buddy market.
They're trying to engage in price fixing on the Bio Buddies market. They're trying to rig the matches to...
And this is all just one subplot, by the way. There's a lot of other things going on.
It's layers upon layers.
It is layers upon layers. So that's some of the things you have to look forward to season 2 of Gate 9. But of course, there's a lot in season 1.
For a group of superheroes that have a very common origin story, we have a very uncommon routes of achieving our objectives.
That's true. Any kind of hints you want to give about them? What's coming up for listeners in season 1?
I mean, I get to rename one of my aspects to 4,218 plus 1.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. I can't wait for the listeners to hear about the marriage proposal.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. It's a player on player marriage proposal, player character on player character.
Oh, in the dance battle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's a dance battle too. There's a lot to look forward in season 1. I feel like. So that's something. Yeah. I just want to give these kind of juicy hints, so you stay tuned, stay listening. We appreciate your comments.
We love your comments.
So please keep commenting and rate and review us on iTunes if you haven't already. And
iTunes.
Buy my book, 30% off. Buy my book.
Buy his book.
Buy my book. So that's been episode 139, Chains of Command.
Woo!
Chains of Command.
Toy Store.
Bye.